Hi there from Orlando. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for the Florida Consortium Online Meetups. My name is Michael Preston, and I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Consortium of Metropolitan Research Universities. For those of you who don't know us, the Florida Consortium is a partnership between Florida International University, University of Florida, and University of South Florida. And I have to say, times have changed. Prior to March, along with my small team, we traveled a lot. Typically, we'd host and sponsor meetings and conferences across the state. We'd attend meetings from Tallahassee to Miami, from Orlando to San Francisco, advocating for our students and the promise of higher education. And that reach is extended beyond higher education. We attend partner events and meetings to help employers and economic development organizations understand the ROI of higher education as it relates to skilled workers in the economy. But as you well know, many of us were instructed to work from home due to COVID-19 beginning in mid-March. We had to pivot so that we can continue our work advocating for Metropolitan University students. The Florida Consortium Online Meetups was born out of this idea. For the next several weeks, we'll be meeting online to discuss student engagement, career readiness, and the realities of COVID-19 as it relates to education. Please make a point to join us each week. The roster of Florida Consortium Online Meetups is available on our website. So before I introduce today's speaker, I'd like to thank Helios Education Foundation for their support on our collaborative work, which includes this series. They've been a great partner with us for years, and I know that they are supportive of all the work that we're doing to help combat COVID-19 in the higher education space. So now let's get started. I'm excited about today's speaker. I'd actually consider him kind of like a friend of mine now. We've been working together for a long time. Samyr Qureshi is co-founder and CEO of Knack Technologies. Samyr and his team help institutions grapple with engagement and student success via virtual tutoring centers. Samyr, along with his partner, Dennis Hansen, were featured in the 2020 Forbes 30 Under 30 list for education and also won the 2019 Lumina Foundation Innovation Prize. Remember, throughout the presentation, please post questions to either myself or probably Samyr, or comments in the comment section. Samyr, now that I've listed all of your great bona fides, I toss it over to you. Take it away.
Awesome. Had to make sure I wasn't muted there. It's nice to meet everyone again. My name is Samyr Qureshi, and thanks again to Michael's team and the Florida Consortium for allowing me the opportunity to chat a little bit more about what we're working on and some of the innovations that we think are necessary and exciting during this time. So a little bit more about myself. As Michael said, co-founder and CEO of a company called Knack. We're based in Tampa, Florida. I'm currently the only one in the office, so I can embarrass myself out here, but we are named as one of the fastest growing tutoring technology platforms in the country. I'm a former graduate of the University of Florida and have worked at various companies, including Nielsen, Apple, and Gartner. And just a little bit more about us as an organization, we're partnering with institutions to help them streamline and scale peer-to-peer support services, namely with the idea of increasing student retention and employability. Engagement is a big component of that as well, just given the inherent peer-to-peer nature of what is sort of being conducted through these interactions. Listed some of our partners here in the state of Florida, as well as some of our newer partners outside of the state. And one of our sort of senior advisors and inspirers of the organization is George Koo, who many of you may know as sort of a forefather or expert in high impact practices. We have weekly calls with him and very much sort of appreciate his work for the space and helping us to prove out that the next generation high impact practice could potentially be peer-to-peer tutoring. Moreover, a couple of other interesting facts about our organization. We are a GEARS impact rated organization. So while we are a for-profit company, we also care about driving a strong social impact. So every year we're rated on our impact metrics defined as students served and jobs created on a campus. On top of that, we're also backed by Arizona State University's enterprise partners. They are a strategic backer and investor in the company, along with ETS, the creators of the GRE. So obviously we've gone through a lot of changes these days. I'm sure the new reality, the new normal has been a bit of a shock to a lot of folks, and I know it has been for students as well from just sort of what we're hearing in the community. Our passion has always been about building an amazing peer tutoring product with this idea that the peer-to-peer nature uniquely positions us to be able to double our impact. So what I mean by that is a peer-to-peer model, and really in student success-oriented language, means giving students academic enrichment, right, allowing them to sort of develop their intellectual abilities in a classroom environment as well as outside of the classroom environment, focused on that academic context. Social engagement, so giving me the opportunity to connect with another student who's in my class or in my degree or in my major and be able to get that social support that I might need, sort of being more co-curricular. And then, of course, financial mobility or financial capability. A lot of students have lost their jobs right now, have been socially sort of economically displaced, and we want to be able to sort of tie these threads together to what we call the nexus of student success, the academics, the social, and then that financial mobility. So giving students really flexible opportunities to learn and earn, as we call it, earn a flexible income to meet the demands of higher ed and just life's costs, but always tying this back to sort of student success. So a little bit more about sort of the platform as a company. There's a lot of uncertainty today in what's going to happen in the fall, potentially next spring. Are things going to be online? Are they going to be in person? And I think the nice thing about Knack is that we help you administer and deliver tutoring both in person and online. So prior to COVID, we had a number of partners like Florida A&M, University of Florida, who they're used to sort of the in-person offering. And COVID-19 hit, they called us up and they said, hey, can we switch everything online? And they were able to do that overnight. Historically, about 50% of our sessions were in person, the other 50% were online, but naturally everything is sort of migrated online. It's just important to note that our platform is really here to help you be ready for both modalities. So if you need to switch to that normalcy that we're striving towards, which means in person on campus, very quickly students can use the same platform. So the idea here is that students can find a tutor that's taken their course before. The institution is heavily involved in that. I'll sort of talk through that along this webinar. These sessions can be booked on a one-on-one setting. They can be in a group setting, again, on campus, online. If they're on campus, there's approved locations the administration can set. And then, of course, the tutors have a really flexible and meaningful job opportunity to be able to sort of bolster their skill sets and hone in on those 21st century soft skills. So really, there's two ways we're working with campuses. Today, campuses already have a network of tutors, and they've historically always had tutors. That's great, and we've actually been offering our platform at no cost until the fall to help them streamline and scale that body of tutors in an online environment using our platform. So what that looks like is onboarding those existing W-2 based staff tutors. You would receive reports on how they're performing, and then being able to pay them out on your end through your payroll system. Benefits are, again, you keep your same tutors, you're able to scale them online through one unified platform that also allows you to go back in person in the fall if you did want to continue working with us. And there's no tutor recruitment necessary. You've already sort of got this body of students that you're just trying to sort of proliferate. The other flip side of that is being able to supplement what you're already doing. So it's no joke that students were not signed up entirely to take classes online, but now they're forced to. For that, a lot of campuses like University of Akron have said, you know what, we need to actually provide more tutors. And so what we'd like to do is leverage this 1099 model that we have. What that means is we will supplement your existing services by onboarding more peer tutors into the network. So what that is are typically your high achieving students. Again, you can be involved directly in that, which I'll talk about. But the idea here is that we identify with you who those top students are. We collectively reach out to them and say, hey, you know what, you'd be a great tutor and we'd love for you to be onboarded. Because we need a lot more support right now, and it's a great way for you to make a flexible income. Knack basically pays them out on a rolling basis after each session, and then of course you all would receive administrative reporting through dashboards and things like that. The benefit here is, again, more jobs to students, driving more engagement, and encouraging students to connect in an academic context. It's what we call a social bridge in an academic context. So it's still a peer, took your class at your campus, just connecting online, and they're going to walk you through exactly what you need to be successful. There's no hiring costs, no delays in that, so you don't have to overwhelm your employment office right now. You can very quickly create these opportunities, push them out, students can pick them up, and overnight you've scaled up your tutoring center. We're actually just finalizing an engagement with the University of South Florida on this through the Office of Student Success. They have an awesome academic support center, but they can't handle all the demand, and for courses that they just typically haven't had a lot of demand for, they need to be able to ensure no student is left behind. Equity is really key and access is important. So we're here to really be that partner for them in a technology landscape. So one of the biggest things that I've kind of mentioned here is involvement from the institution. So what I want to do is allow you to sort of paint that picture in your head. So when we really think about the ways we engage with campuses, it's really, we get the platform going, but then it's important for faculty and student success coaches and advisors to be directly involved in this process. What that means is referring best fit students to be peer tutors. You set that criteria and our system will enforce it. So at USF, it's, I believe, a B+ or an A- or better in the course. They have a training program that they're going to administer on their end. And some campuses say, as long as you've done well in a course and you have a professor recommendation, that's fine. Some are saying, we want you to do training, we want you to do a background check, whatever you all would like to sort of enforce, you can do that. And our system will ensure that that's happening. And then, of course, ensuring that at-risk students are prescribed free support through the platform. So what happens typically is that, student success coaches, academic advisors, professors during faculty office hours, they're identifying students that are typically sort of at risk, and they're hearing the questions and may not always have the answers. But if they've got this network, frontline sort of network of validated and sort of qualified tutors, it's very easy for them to prescribe that. And we've actually made it so simple that an academic advisor can pull up a profile and share the actual profile of the tutor with the student and say, hey, I noticed you're really struggling in this concept area. Here's a tutor that took that course with me before, did well. She's on the platform. I'm going to send you her link to her profile. All you got to do is click sign up and you can shoot a request right out to her. So there's a lot of opportunities to, again, drive usage, leveraging student success advocates on your campus. In our eyes, everyone has a hand in student success, and we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to be involved. Moreover, sort of on the technology side, we have a 24/7 help center and live support, so we'll be able to communicate directly with students with any technology questions, so you don't have to deal with that. We'll create web landing pages. We have partnered pages that we have. If you go to ufl.joinknack.com or usf.joinknack.com, you can see what that looks like. We'll create curated engagement plans. So hand in hand, we'll basically come up with the website copy, the email templates, and we'll work to make sure that those get reached out to students at the right time. Create custom faculty webinar videos so you can shoot this out to your departments or colleges. And then we've also come up with a data efficacy model in partnership with ASU Enterprise Partners, one of our backers, to prove the ROI and that there are being retention gains here using a system like Knack. So a little bit more kind of about some of the success we've had within the Florida Consortium network. So about over a year ago now, USF College of Business came to us and said, hey, we're running a drop-in tutoring operation to supplement what the central campus is doing because they're not able to cover our high DFW courses. But we have an issue, which is we've got an adjunct faculty member who he's focusing on sort of managing this drop-in thing where students will sometimes come in at certain hours, sometimes they won't, and it's very inefficient. A lot of times I'm ending up paying for tutors that are just sitting there and not doing anything, and we kind of want to find a way to revamp that. And so we introduced them to Knack, and we talked about this appointment-based driven system that we have where we onboard a network of tutors. They only get paid out as sessions happen, so you don't have to worry about dollars being depleted. We can target the main courses you want to focus on. So in this case, it was about 8 or 10 high DFW courses they wanted to focus on driving retention in. And we can make sure that those courses have pointed tutors and pointed usage to ensure that students are persisting. So a little bit of a timeline. We kicked off last fall. Within the first couple weeks, we had almost 90 tutors signed up, covering over 80 classes. A couple weeks after that, we started telling students, hey, this is now available, it's paid for by the institution. And then less than a month after that, 45 students had started using it, booked almost 300 hours. And by the end of the semester, we had almost 20% of the student body within the MUMA college using the platform. Some really interesting stats that we found is that 65% of students that had used Knack had previously never utilized campus services before. That's not to say that campus services are bad, it's just that their courses weren't covered or the hours didn't meet them, right? Or the online modality wasn't offered, right? And so Knack gives them that flexibility, meets students where they are, especially now where you've got adult learners who are out of jobs, taking care of kids. They need that flexibility. Students today that are picking up side jobs here and there, they need that flexibility. And so, we really, really believe that if you create something and you increase the accessibility, you can actually increase usage. And what better thing to increase usage for than tutoring? So setting high standards is obviously really important, and we really partner with the institution on that. So USF came to us, this is a central school now, Office of Student Success through Dr. DeSalle, and said, look, we want to make sure they're trained through our training program. We said, that's totally fine. They're enrolled in an SLS course that they're going to be taking, and then once they're completed, they're verified on our platform. So that's awesome. If your campus has the resources, the manpower, and the ability to sort of administer training continuing through this process, that's amazing, and we will absolutely work with you on that. There have been a number of campuses who have said, hey, we just can't deliver training at scale. We also don't have an online modality of doing that. So about 8 months ago, we partnered with CRLA, sort of the certifying body in tutoring, the College Reading and Learning Association, and we built a fully online training module. It's about an hour and a half, short response, multiple choice, fill in the blank, and it talks about these main sort of topics here. What it means to be a tutor, what it takes to be an effective tutor, types of tutoring, we even go to the modalities, and how to use the platform itself. We're actually revamping this entirely right now, and we're gonna have a second version of it coming out in the next few weeks. This is also completely offered for free through the platform for campuses that wish to utilize it. It'll cover Title IX training as well. But what's really interesting about this is we talked about how it's important for sort of faculty and those to be involved in this. Well, we wanted to take it a step further because we really believe that there's a lot of deeper learning that's happening here. And this is where the work of Dr. George Koo comes in and helping to prove that it's not just a tutor, it's potentially that tutor developing skill sets that are important later in life. So if you can imagine, if I'm getting tutoring from Michael, and Michael is a great accounting student, as he's tutoring me, he's not just, proving that he's a really great accounting student, he's also proving that he's got critical thinking, teamwork, collaboration, problem solving skills. And we want him to make that connection. So when he's sitting at a job interview and someone says, tell me a time you've worked on a team, he can say, well, I led Samyr and Austin in a group tutoring session, and it went really, really well because I was able to break down concepts on the spot, and potentially here's a badge that showed for it. I'm peeking you on what I'm about to show you next, but hopefully you understand what I'm talking about here. There's a lot of awareness and reflection that can come from these interactions, and it's not just about the 2T, it's about getting that tutor really excited too, to make this more of a proactive experience. So to kind of build on that, USF has been really robust with sort of their career development side of things. And so there's Dr. Ruth Ann Ashley, who we've been talking to very much and has helped us really shape what this looks like. And Peter Thorsett, who might actually also be listening in here. But our goal is to, again, turn peer-to-peer tutoring into something that's a meaningful educational experience. So we create what we call these touch points. At various points through their interactions as a tutor, they're led through guided reflection prompts. And as they accumulate more experience on the platform, the institution can actually meld that and actually put in different topics that they wish the tutors to sort of think about. The idea, again, is reinforce that subject matter knowledge, help them build employment experience, and increase their sense of community engagement, awareness, develop those skills so that, a tutor who's had a lot of sessions, again, walks away with this as, I wasn't just a tutor and sort of helping a student, I was a tutor that honed these certain skill sets. So again, what's really awesome right now is we're in the nascent stages of fully baking this out. So we're able to really create custom touch points for tutors, which basically allows any institution to come in and create an experiential learning program around this whole experience. We have some campuses that are talking about creating an internship class out of this, right? Getting really creative with the way that this can be baked into the curriculum. So there's a lot of excitement around this on our side as well, and we'd love to collaborate with campuses that are interested in this side of the platform as well. Last few points here, I think, data is obviously really important. Understanding academic roadblocks and demand in real time is important. A lot of times there's sort of been this idea of lagging indicators where at the end of the semester we go back and look at data. Well, the nice part is in real time we can give you leading indicators. So help you understand that if there's a cluster of students that are struggling in this topic area or in this section, what does that say about those students, the course, the curriculum, the professor? How can we, from a pedagogy and an instructional design standpoint, basically better this course, right? And make sure these students are not left behind. So very quickly, you can dynamically figure out demand, which is really interesting. So you may only decide to cover the top 20 high DFW courses for, let's say, adult learners on your campus. But that doesn't mean we preclude other students from being able to at least come onto the platform. And what we do there is we're actually able to track demand. So if, I'm in that adult learner cohort that's being sort of subsidized for Knack, but my best friend who's a traditional student comes in and needs help in a genetics course, and I'm a business student, the institution can still grab that demand and say, okay, it looks like we're actually getting a lot more demand in this area, and let's actually potentially use that 1099 model to staff up more tutors, or let's go to our student employment office and ask them to hire more folks. So there's a lot of ways where, if 10 students come in today in a drop-in session, it's really hard to field that. But with something like this, you can actually look at that data and course correct in real time. Just the last main point here on the data side, thinking about tutoring today, right? Or call it yesterday, prior to COVID-19. It's typically done on a walk-in basis, right? Where students will come in, or even an appointment basis, and they'll book ahead of time. And your only way of actually capturing that demand is from them physically walking into a center or making an appointment. And unless they actually come and meet you at that place, it's actually difficult to continue to follow up with them. The difference about using something like a platform like Knack is we have what we call a funnel. So students will come in here, they'll create an account. So you've got a really sort of wide net of students who say, you know what, at some point during this semester, I'm gonna need support. So they create an account, right? Which means they're already in this pool of students. And then you can start to see, have they searched, have they scheduled a session, have they completed, and where the drop-off points are at each of those places. The magic here is that you're able to capture data at different points and be able to nudge them through that process to get them all the way through to a completed session, and hopefully kicking a feedback loop where they're talking to their friends and they're continuing to come back, ultimately helping you support more students. So capture that interest and nudge them all the way through that process until they complete a session. And then again, those student success advocates, coaches, advisors, professors, department chairs, they have the ability to help push students down this path as well, again, ensuring that every student has the opportunity to get the support they need to succeed. So when you zoom out, as an organization, I mentioned in the sort of title slide that we really care about driving a strong social impact. And we create what we call win-win-wins. Students get help in every course they need help in, on campus or online. Again, everything's online now, but when things resume to normal, because they will, we're still gonna be there at the same platform. There's no switches happening. It's comfortable and engaging learning environment. Peer tutors get that flexible, really meaningful virtual employment opportunities, reinforcing that subject matter knowledge, building those career competencies. And colleges can scale their reach without having to worry about adding a ton of overhead right now when budgets are really limited. Moreover, you're tracking that retention, the demand, driving more live peer-to-peer engagement among students. Dr. Koo said one of the most exciting things about why he wanted to get involved with us is that it's obvious and everybody knows that the more time you spend with your peers, the more that influence will actually have on your future. And so if we can encourage students to sort of, grow together in communities that really encourage them academically and socially, we really think that that just bolsters down on student success. And then one of the things I didn't really chat about too much here because I wasn't sure if it'd be too relevant for the audience, but we've actually had companies, foundations come in and completely cover the cost of tutoring for campuses. So at the University of South Florida, the Movement College of Business, we showed that timeline. The dean there, Dean Lamayam, had a really large advisory council of different local business CEOs, HR representatives that like to just engage with the campus and hire top students. We had a meeting and we presented some of the data. We had a student come in and talk, and we had a tutor come in and talk. And on the spot, we had an alumni say, I want to back the program $50,000 for the next 2 years. So now it doesn't come out of anyone's budget. In fact, it's additive, goes towards your advancement goals, written to the foundation, and is earmarked for the platform. So the benefit here is money goes back into those pockets of the students, free support, more dollars back to your campus. So we really help you position it as a sponsorship opportunity. And I know right now budget is really tough, right? And so, we've been doing a lot of reading and talking to a lot of our partners about the CARES Act and how the federal government has actually expanded that. There is greater flexibility in that spending to support online learning tools, which Knack is very much one of those, and to really help campuses enhance that technology. I know many campuses are just trying to keep the lights on and survive, so I'm not saying that this is the only place dollars can come from, but hopefully this gives you sort of a sense of ideas of maybe where we could be more creative if this was something you're interested in. And then again, double down on that corporate sponsorship model. We'll actually custom create collateral with your campus. So we'll do like an ROI analysis to show them the investment, screenshots of where all their branding goes, press releases, things like that. Florida Power and Light actually just supported Florida A&M's tutoring program for the fall. So there's a lot of opportunity to engage corporate partners and say, look, you want to hire top students, here are amazing students, the tutors, and here's a really great way of giving back to students who need it and supporting a university to ensure that students are successful in the long run. So with that being said, I did want to open it up to Q&A and see if folks wanted to have sort of more of an open discussion. And Michael, feel free to jump in as well if you had anything else you wanted to add as well.
Sure. Samyr, can you tell me a little bit more about kind of some of the work you've been doing with George Koo and some of the kind of early research that you've been thinking about when it comes to high impact practices? Like, is there some data, maybe some information that you're gathering right now that shows why this could be classified as a high impact practice?
Yep, I'm actually going to pull up a document. So, one of the things that was really exciting about reaching out to Dr. Koo and kind of letting him know what our vision was, can you all see this document here? Just trying to see if it's, let's see. Make sure I'm sharing my screen here. Can I just get a quick confirmation if you all can see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things we had reached out to Dr. Koo about was there's these 11 high impact practices, right? And study abroad is one of them, doing undergraduate research. But how can tutoring not be one of those? The act of being a tutor, right? And how can we also level the playing field so that every student can have an opportunity to be involved in this? Whereas study abroad, it's awesome, but not every student has that opportunity. So accessibility was a big component that was interesting to him about, well, tutoring is a massive part of every campus. If you strip away sports, you strip away auxiliary services, hospitality, which is pretty much what's happened right now with COVID, the heart of a campus is teaching and learning, right? And tutoring marries the idea of academic affairs, that retention-oriented, persistent sort of mechanism, with the student affairs component of engagement and co-curricular connections with students. And so we sort of have sketched out a high-level outline here of what would be a direct measure of sort of helping to prove that this could be high impact. And I'm happy to share this afterwards, but the main things that we want to be looking at are, what was the direct measures pre and post? So what was their ACT score? What were some of their content test scores in the past, and how have those been sort of impacted after tutoring? Which I think most folks that have followed the data in tutoring know that generally tutoring is going to increase them if it's done correctly. Some of our work with ETS, the GRE folks, is to build out proficiency profiles with tutors as they continue to build badges. So, it's a number of different things, but really the idea here is tracking those direct measures and then indirect measures. So potentially even going after a tutor has graduated and ended up in the workforce, interviewing their manager to say, looking at this individual versus some of their peers and cohorts that you've also recruited that did not tutor, have they sort of displayed other characteristics and skills that you've never seen or that you believe to be higher performing? So I'm happy to share this. Again, it's very rough, but it's something that we're sort of trying to use as a work in progress and continue to hone in on. And I think there is an opportunity to collaborate with folks like Nessie or Bessie. I think Bessie's actually said that I think 2/3 of students have intentions of using tutoring, and less than 1/3 end up ever using it at the end of their college career, right? And accessibility is one of those things. They claim they didn't know about it. And so that's where we really hope technology can help drive that forward to make this more of a proactive thing than a reactive thing. So I'm hoping this answered some of what you're looking for, Michael. But again, I'm happy to also share this for campuses that are interested in this work and potentially connect you with George Koo to hear about how he's thinking about this. We're probably going to be doing a webinar in the next couple of weeks to talk about how technology can foster high impact practices at a little bit more of scale, considering the needs today. But I'm hoping that this gives folks a bit of a general sense.
Latoya, you said that there was a question out there. If you want to read that off.
Yes, sure. There's one question in the chat. How might this work for a teacher or a faculty that teaches a senior capstone course offered, say, in the final semester? Would it be peer-to-peers that are graduating?
It could be, yeah. It could be a student who's about a year out. So it's very much up to the campus when we're doing the program design element of our engagement. Is we'll try to figure out at what point sort of are you trying to get these students support. If it's junior, senior year, your pool of tutors usually shrinks a little bit. But I think the flexible nature of Knack is really nice. There's no commitment to you got to work 10 hours and you got to do it at this location. So what ends up happening is even if a student's one semester removed and they've gone on to a job or grad school, they still have the ability, and we do single sign-on integrations and such to ensure that it's only your students in that course. They can still be involved for as long as you'd like. We typically see about a year out after graduation. So at that point, it's sort of recent alumni. And we've also sometimes seen situations where students who are in the class and have maybe just done really well and are ahead of their other classmates may also be able to support those students. So again, these are some of the items we discuss in our program design and kind of craft the engagement plan and the proposal and the statement of work as we continue to think about how we want to engage.
Samyr, tell me again, you were a student at the University of Florida, and you decided to go down this path of peer-to-peer tutoring via the web. I'm always interested when folks are innovating and they're thinking about why, what's the why behind this? Why do you think that this is such a powerful way of enhancing student engagement? And was that in the intent? And the second part of the question, was that in the intent originally, or was this just a kind of a development of the idea over time?
Yeah, so I think just a little bit more kind of a personal story. I'm a first-gen immigrant, so I moved to the States when I was pretty young. My mom had me tested for gifted as a young boy and was excited about coming to the US and having a student excel. And she was actually told that I was quite the opposite of that and that I needed to be sort of placed on a very special academic track. And had I not been on medication and had a bunch of intervention, I wasn't going to get anywhere in life. And my mom, being a great mom that she is, never really let me hear that until much later in life. And so I ended up excelling. I got my AA done in high school from St. Petersburg College. And I ended up actually becoming student body president of SPC while I was in high school in the Tampa Bay area. And so I think that sort of gave me the insight into the higher ed world and how sort of even SGA funding, things like that worked. And then I was able to get admitted to University of Florida. I graduated early from there and had an opportunity to work at Apple and Gartner. And it was right around this time I went home. My mom sort of told me the story and later on realized that that definitely wasn't true. And I think the one thing that was really meaningful was personalized support. And while I loved the companies I worked at, I really wanted an opportunity to make a deeper impact and sort of leave the corporate world. So lasted all of about 9 months in my full-time job and decided to quit my job, moved back to the University of Florida with this idea that, when you look at the landscape, tutoring has generally been hamstrung by costs. It's really been expensive for institutions to scale. It's also been expensive on a private basis. The solutions that are out there like Smart Thinking or Tutor.com, they work well, but they're expensive, and those dollars go outside to outsource tutors wherever they might be across the world. We just thought there was an opportunity with the peer-to-peer model, and it was very much inspired by what I was seeing happening as a recent grad with Uber and Airbnb and flexible working models, right? And I think Christensen Institute has said that by 2024, I think over 60 or 70% of the population will be involved in the sharing economy in some manner. And I think we wanted to sort of blend these two ideologies together and say that students need more support, and people love learning from each other more so than they do learning from someone who's way further ahead of them. And so if there's an opportunity to intentionally connect students, that's what we want to do. So in 2016, we launched Knack at the University of Florida. We won the business plan competition there and won some money, and then we went on to raise a few million in venture capital and have entirely devoted that back into our product. We started student to student. We would find high achieving students. We said, you want to make a few bucks, you can tutor. We'd verify them, and we scaled that to 60 campuses. And then over time, we realized that the tutors were going to great companies. We realized that students on the receiving end that needed it the most oftentimes couldn't afford it. And so folks like UCF Student Government reached out to us and they said, hey, can we subsidize this? As students, we need more support that's flexible, and we'd love to do that. So that started to happen, and kind of one thing fell into place after another, and ETS, the creators of the GRE, and ASU decided to back us. And then last year we won the Lumina Prize, and it was really sort of encouraging for us to think about how can we help students get jobs that are meaningful that also end up creating the scale of support. And so, it's only been about 18 months since we started partnering with institutions, and we partnered with a good number of them now. Since COVID-19 has hit, we've doubled our customer count. And to be completely transparent, we've given our product away for free in many cases and are still open to doing that if that can be helpful, knowing that this is a long-term partnership. But over time, we really think this is the future, and we think you see 20–30% of the student body of Florida A&M using Knack in the first month. You don't hear that about other products, and I think that's because we focus on the student first. And now we're building our next generation administrative dashboards and tools for learning centers and advisors and student success coaches to operate this. It's a really exciting time for us, and again, I really appreciate the opportunity to share our story here.
Thanks for that, Samyr. I have another question from the chat, and we'll actually compliment first from Cesar Castro, who said, thank you for the presentation. There's definitely a lot of value in the tool, but he has a question. What are your statistics, full campus engagement and buy-in from staff that you can share? Are there any examples that you can share with us?
Yeah, so, I think in many cases, this has been something that strategically has come from provosts, vice provosts, deans, associate deans that really look at this from a 30,000-foot level. But more recently, we've actually had a lot of advisors, student success coaches, and faculty members say, I can't support the load of questions that I'm getting or the support, and we don't have the resources to turn them to something internal. And so we've actually had professors at Florida A&M get directly involved in this to help bring this up and say, hey, to the accounting department, this is something we actually want to require for students that are below a certain GPA. And the way we're able to sort of do different reporting mechanisms, we can actually tell you if students have used it. And if they haven't, there's an opportunity to intervene. So we've historically been sort of, implemented from a top-down perspective, but more recently it's come bottoms up. And so from a statistics standpoint, it's hard to tell you, but generally, if faculty members feel that pain of students really need help and I want to give them a place to sort of connect and continue to engage with one another, oftentimes they're able to bring it upwards. And because we're not really charging anything for this right now, we're able to run smaller scale pilots and are open to that. So what would be awesome for any advisors, student success coaches, tutoring center folks that are out there, we'd love to have a just conversation and an interview about how this could be helpful. Not just so that we can try to sell you on this, but so we can ensure that our product is being built the right way. Our head of product, Dennis, is actually leading interviews with campuses now, and we want to include advisors and faculty members in that. So it can very much be driven bottom up. It's just got to be the right folks who have the right determination and drive, because right now there's so many different things happening on campus, and we don't mean to add one thing, but to help you understand that this is something that will scale when normalcy returns and will always be available online if and when another issue ever did pop up.
I got another question for you, Samyr. As a college student, outside of the classroom, what kind of activities were you engaged in?
A lot of clubs. As mentioned at SPC, I was pretty involved with student government. So Dr. Williams, who's now the president, was actually the provost at the time. So I've known her, literally since I was 16 or 17 years old. And one thing that I really appreciated about sort of the involvement outside of the curricular, the sort of classroom, was the diversity. St. Petersburg College, I had grandmothers in my class. I had folks that used to be homeless. I had teenagers that were my age. I had adults that were my parents' age. It was so diverse. And I think that gave me such an interesting lens into building this product today. And even moving on into the work atmosphere, being able to graduate early and be one of the youngest people at Gartner at the time, I felt really comfortable in my own skin. And I think, again, if we can intentionally use our product to connect students in those ways too, it's only going to be that much better. So there's a lot of sort of intramural sports, clubs, student government, fraternities, socially, things like that. But I was actually not a business major. I was a pre-law student. And so I took a bunch of sociology classes and was just really interested in learning about why people make decisions and in society and what that society could look like in the future. And I think that's what really intrigued me about the sharing economy, is I really believe it's here to stay, and flexible work, future of work, is just sort of being built on the fly, and the sharing economy has stayed. It's actually grown. And so I think there's an opportunity for us as an organization to, or at least me personally, to take my experiences and bring that in. But a lot of it was actually inspired by sort of my co-curricular experiences in college.
So how would those be similar? What are the similarities you see for, say, one of your one of the tutors at, say, USF, and what they get out of that experience versus what you got out of maybe, say, student government?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I would say one of the things that tutors always say is, I don't always know the answer to a question immediately. So I got to kind of take a step back and be able to keep calm and not let the student know that I don't know what I'm talking about. And so in a similar situation in, different organizational meetings, we might be challenged by a faculty advisor with a question that we just don't know the answer to. We don't want to be embarrassed, but being able to sort of be calm in that moment, be poised and take a step back and be cool and collected to be able to then kind of attack it the right way, right? And I think that's a part of resiliency. I think that's a part of just lifelong skills. And again, those are sort of the examples I was able to give when I was sitting down at my interview to say, hey, I led a group of 45 men in a fraternity as being an executive council member and an organizational member. And in a similar way, as a tutor, I was able to lead a group of 12 or 13 students who, after one of the sessions, one of the students came to me and cried and said, if she doesn't pass her exam, she's going to fail or lose her scholarship. And I really had to help her through that moment. We've heard tutors say things like that, and that's where we think the training is really important. The opportunity for that kind of information to be relayed back to the institution so they can course correct and make sure students get the assistance and the support that they need in real time. Again, leading versus lagging. And so again, those are some of the similarities just offhand that I'm thinking of, but hoping that made sense.
Sure. And I've got one final follow-up, and then I know Latoya has a question from the chat. Have you had relationships build out of these meetup, these tutoring environments beyond the tutoring environment, where they become, business partners or friends or, colleagues in some way? Not relationships. I don't think we're looking for those. But, some sort of way that it builds communities within their disciplines.
Yep. So we've, I don't know if we've actually tracked sort of like relationships, because we're not really focused on that. But we have had many tutors basically say, hey, I've actually gotten to know people that they both, the tutor themselves is about to enter med school, and the student that is seeking tutoring is getting help for their prereqs to go to med school, to say, hey, I actually, after our tutoring, helped them through their med school application, and we became really good friends. They're now a year, below me in med school, and we're still, we're friends, and we literally met on Knack. So talk about sort of the student engagement component of this. One of the biggest things, and you may see some of this on our blog, that we try to drill home is transforming tutoring from a transactional to a relationship-driven experience. So I walked into a center, or I clicked to connect with an online tutor, and then I never got to know that tutor. Next time I went and got another tutor. And as I'm looking at the deck, I'm literally seeing that this was what one of those quotes were, is you get to continue to build a relationship and have that progress-oriented discussion with that same student. And I think that naturally fosters a relationship. You build rapport, you get to know each other, and sometimes that pushes through into social context of, hey, do you want to grab lunch after the session? I notice you live in the same sort of area, and we might even be in the same living learning community. So I think there's a lot that's happening there, again, in a traditional sort of in-person on-campus experience. But right now, in online transformation, how do we mirror that in an online environment? And I think this is one opportunity to do that.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Another question from the chat, and you mentioned this a little bit before, but I think it's worth restating. So the question is this: have institutions with well-established learning and tutoring centers incorporated Knack? And if they have they blended the Knack platform with existing resources and supports?
Yeah, so we have some campuses that completely keep their tutors out of it, and this is purely supplemental. We have some campuses that have their existing tutors moonlighting on Knack to increase the accessibility and to ensure that they're available in one place. And we've had some campuses that are operating only their existing tutoring center entirely on Knack. So it can really be designed in the way that you want to use it. We think the hybrid model works really nicely because you can essentially increase the accessibility of those existing tutors, and they can continue to be paid out on your end through payroll and what have you. You can get more data and analytics around that. And then we can add in where they're you may not have the resources to hire an actual tutor to sort of work 4 or 5 hours a week consistently, but you want to allow them to be available through that 1099 flexible network. That's that hybrid model, right? And so that's actually what we're doing with USF now. And so there's a lot of opportunity to get creative in the way that's designed. We have badges built in so they can actually badge tutors differently if they've actually been verified and are part of the tutoring center versus sort of a college specific or supplemental tutor. So there's a lot of opportunities to get creative with sort of the badging component with the program design that we do. But our goal is to really help supercharge tutoring, right? And just as Handshake has helped career centers, we are moving towards being the platform for tutoring centers. And we've actually, again, we'd love to do product interviews where showing sort of some of these screenshots and mock-ups to folks about how they'd like to see it designed and what those data reports should look like, what functionality would you really need. These are the conversations we're having right now. And I think, historically, we may have some scar tissue because we began as a consumer-oriented business, but I can promise you the only reason we did that was because we wanted to get started quickly and we wanted to support students fast. And at the time I was 23, 24, and I did not know how to sell to higher ed. But over time, what started to happen is we've realized that the best thing to do is to not charge students, but to make this a more meaningful job opportunity. In fact, we have 30, 40% of tutors that will volunteer. They do it because they see what's happening and they feel really good about it. So if we have an opportunity to sort of help drive those sorts of interactions, reduce costs for everybody, while still making this something that's meaningful, there's training involved, and there's institutional involvement, we think that's the best case scenario.
Awesome. From a subject matter, what are some courses that you were surprised you got requests for tutors? I think everyone assumes that tutoring is almost ubiquitous with STEM, right? And I would assume that most of your courses are STEM, but I don't know that for sure. Like, what are some of the odd ones that you were surprised at seeing?
So, as you know, FAMU has a strong agriculture program by nature of the institution. And so I always think it's funny because a lot of folks will go seek out a tutoring on their end, right? They'll go online and they'll find a tutor on Chegg or wherever, and it's an economics tutor. And you think that economics tutor is going to be a good tutor for you, but they don't really understand the ins and outs of that course. So I think what's really interesting is we'll get session requests for like advanced agricultural business economics, right? It's this super weird course that not even a ton of students take, but a lot of students may struggle in. And a typical economics tutor probably won't cut it. They won't understand the context of the questions, the nuances of the professor. So that's where sort of the flexible basis of these tutors being able to sign up and say, hey, I took that, I did well, I did the training, and I'm ready to help you if and when you need it. They can sit dormant for 4 months, and then the night before the exam, they could get a request and they could pick it up and help that student. We can make a match. So courses like that are really interesting. There's a couple astronomy courses at the University of Florida that I never thought would be a heavy hitter, but they are. And so I think, you think about key gateway courses, high DFWs, the economics, the calcs, the chemistry, the biology. Those are definitely the big ones. But then the long tail, the upper level courses, for example, at the USF, we're focusing on the upper level biology courses, right? So things like genetics and courses where, again, it's not a huge course because if you've made it that far, you're obviously really determined, but you're still going to need some assistance. So we'll get some really interesting ones here and there. And again, sometimes when we look at more liberal arts oriented courses, there'll be philosophy sessions, which are really cool. So it really melds outside of that STEM focus. But I think that idea that these tutors can be dormant but then be activated immediately is the reason why they can still sort of get the help and request courses one-off that are really nuanced outside of what they're typically used to providing services for.
Thanks for that. Samyr, so a tricky question for you, because and we saved the tricky ones towards the end on purpose. No, I'm just kidding. What would you say to someone that is a little bit skeptical of peer-to-peer tutoring and characterizing it as student engagement? What would you say to a faculty member or an advisor that sort of is a little bit skeptical about that connection?
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're saying skeptical about peer-to-peer tutoring being classified as something that can help drive student engagement?
Yes.
So I think the key is the peer-to-peer piece, right? it's a student on that same campus who has likely had similar or potentially the exact same experience meeting up with another student. When you think about living learning communities, what are they? You're putting students in clusters that have the same aspirations, same degrees, same sort of forward paths, right? And you're putting them together to sort of have these opportunities to collaborate, get to know each other socially, hopefully academically, start to blend the academic and the student affairs components. That's exactly what this is in a way, right? One of the things, we did a session at a conference called HIPS in the States at Texas A&M, sort of pre-COVID in February, and we did it with the Texas System VP of Academic Affairs, and he had said, you know, when he was a young student, one of the earliest memories he had was, you know, someone telling him that when you walk through the student engagement, the student hall, there's a big emblem and you never want to walk over it because it's disrespectful. And he said that was sort of a peer-to-peer engagement that he never really knew who that person was, but he remembered it to this day. And so this idea that peers have a disproportionate, significant amount of influence is true. And I think there's always been that quote, birds of a feather flock together. Well, if we can start to get students to flock together around academic context and tutoring, they're engaging in an academic context, but it's very social, right? It's not someone who's, you know, far removed away from you. It's someone who's literally sat in the same seat. And so I would have a hard time believing it's not an engagement oriented activity. Just because you're not playing sports or you're not, going out to socials doesn't mean it's not engagement. This is academic engagement, and there's a huge social component to it.
Fantastic. Latoya, are there any other questions from the chat?
There aren't any more questions, but I do have a comment to share with you, and it's from Cesar Castro, and he says, thank you for today's session. It speaks to a greater national issue with pedagogy and education systems and the investments we make in higher education. It's definitely a start in identifying this issue and changing the narrative. Keep up the good work and good luck on your entrepreneurship path. Oh, sorry, I said that was the last comment, but now a question just came in right under the nose. So the question is, could this be used to engage students in study groups or greater, I guess beyond the one-to-one academic tutoring? Could it be used in study groups is the question.
So we've definitely experimented with different use cases. In fact, Johns Hopkins is using it in a career context. So trying to take students that have had careers, sort of internships and careers and have come back for postgraduate work to allow them to actually help other students in their navigating their job search and brushing up on their resume and their interviewing skills. So it's definitely an area of interest for us. It's not sort of our bread and butter, but it is something that we're open to exploring with the right campuses. I think study groups are interesting because, again, it's still that academic context, so it's pretty relevant. We do support group interactions, which is really nice. And so I think what we've typically seen is a student will have a group study session with friends and they'll invite a tutor to that group study session to sort of help lead it, right? Almost like a TA on demand to help you sort of make sure you're on the right path and almost be like an academic mentor or coach in that environment. There's definitely opportunities for that. We haven't, to be completely transparent, we haven't done that today. It's something we'd be open to talking about. And I think just the big thing to consider here is that when you invest in something like this, you're investing back into the pockets of your students because the dollars will go back to pay those high achievers as tutors. And so I think there's something really nice about this idea of, that high achiever can lead a study group or can still be involved and sort of supercharge that study group, maybe not just sort of 3 or 4 students studying silently, but maybe 3 or 4 students studying with a tutor helping to lead those question and answer sessions. So, sort of, I think there's an opportunity to chat about it, and I would welcome an email or a reach out to talk more about that.
Fantastic, thank you. At this point, there's no more questions in that chat. So Michael, I'll hand it back to you to close out.
Fantastic. If there's something that I do love, it's not to butt up against an exact hour deadline. That way it gives folks another 5 or so minutes to go grab a cup of coffee before probably that next Zoom meeting or Microsoft Teams meeting that we all have to be at, right? So we want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we certainly appreciate Samyr and the Knack Technologies team for their work